Lindsay Frey. I'm president of Demand Drive. And before we get started, I'd like to make a quick note and encourage anyone who has a question at any point throughout the webinar to go ahead and submit it through the Go to Webinar Questions tab. We have saved a couple minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that come through. So to begin, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. From Scratch Marketing and Media, we have founder Lora Kratchounova. Lora has 20 years of marketing experience, and much of which has been spent in either leadership and management roles or as a senior marketing consultant in various entrepreneurial technology ventures. She's developed go-to-market and social media strategies for some of the biggest B2B and B2C players in the tech space. As I mentioned a moment ago, my name is Lindsay Frey. I'm president and co-founder of Demand Drive, and over the past 12 years I've worked with over 200 technology companies to build or augment their sales development function. As for Demand Drive, which I co-founded in 2011, we are a leading full-service demand generation firm that helps to drive revenue and accelerate business growth for technology companies of all sizes. So our flagship services, DD Outbound and DD Inbound, basically provides sales development process, design, and dedicated sales development reps that generate highly qualified leads or qualify our clients' existing marketing qualified leads. The rest of our services support demand generation initiatives like data, intelligence, and event support. So from here, I'm going to let Lora introduce Scratch, quickly overview the agenda, and dive into digital authority, the new way to build market reputation and drive sales. So Lora, over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. So really excited to be part of this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Scratch Marketing and Media and what we do, and then we'll dive right into the content. Scratch is about 7 years old. We focus on the B2B technology space, and we span the gamut of data center and infrastructure all the way to the applications. We also specialize in specific verticals such as healthcare, IT, mobility, and security. And we do believe that marketing needs to be integrated alongside build on this new concept of digital authority. In terms of the agenda today, what we are going to address jointly with Lindsay are the following questions. So what does it really take today to compete in high growth markets? How has the market changed? What has created this need to think differently about the marketing and the sales funnel? How do you get buyer buy-in before your targets are really ready to buy? And how many of them are really ready to buy at this day and age when technology changes every day and markets are very, very dynamic? How do you shorten a sales cycle by investing in your brand for today and for tomorrow? Because we know that, generating leads and driving sales is important, but what would it take to create a really solid pipeline for the future? And what's the new way of winning buyers' minds and wallets at the same time? This is the concept of digital authority. So essentially what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you through what digital authority is about, what the main concept is about, how this digital authority idea is changing the way we should think about marketing in the marketplace and selling. And then we'll walk you through how do you diagnose where you are on your continuum for digital authority and what are the kinds of KPIs that you can look at regardless of what industry you're in or how developed your market is. Just a bit about the services that we offer and where digital authority fits within our portfolio. We help companies think through their go-to-market plans, how they can attack new market segments, how to be more relevant in existing market segments. Once we figure out what that approach is, then we actually go to market and help companies with content marketing, PR and influencer relations, strategic social media marketing, digital properties, and all the way to sales enablement. These are some of the companies that we have worked with and continue to work with over the years. And just to spice it up for everyone on the webinar, Lindsay and I are going to offer one of the attendees representing one of the companies on this webinar a free digital authority review session at the end of the webinar. So hopefully that will keep you engaged throughout the webinar and keep you excited to be one of the winners at the end of it. All right. So without further ado, we are going to start the main section of the webinar. Essentially, the digital authority realm is the new way to think about the sales and marketing funnel. And what's happening is some of you who have been in marketing and sales for a while are probably familiar with the waterfall model. The thing that has changed is that we're not just creating awareness for our brands anymore. We need to build reputation, and we need to be recognized for the expertise that we build to the market so that people can consider us part of their solution and vendor set when they're ready to buy. What's interesting in this space is that, and we'll talk more about that, is that brands and their executives and their subject matter experts are acting more as journalists and analysts who are educating the market and the buyer about the potential and the opportunities, as opposed to simply selling solutions to well-defined business problems. So in this digital authority realm and in the new times that we live in, the buyer is in control, and we'll talk about what that means, what has necessitated a new way of thinking around the sales and marketing funnel, and in how do you build then for the marketing, for the sales funnel specifically, where vendors are, where buyers are actually ready to buy from companies. What does it take to actually get to that point? So this is the introduction of the concept of digital brand authority. As I said, we'll go through a couple of slides that describe what necessitates this new change in thinking, what's the context for it, and then I'm going to walk you through a specific roadmap of how you can assess your digital authority and what KPIs you need to look at in areas of inquiry. So if we think about, this is one of my favorite ways of describing what has happened to marketing. Marketing has changed tremendously since year 2000, and there are three ways that we describe marketing. Marketing the past, marketing the present, and marketing the future. The reason why we introduce this context is for everyone to understand sort of the difference of the Mad Men era, the infomercial era, and the era of trust, which is the times that we live in. So the way to think about this is that marketing in the past was really based on marketing consistent brand experiences. This is when you have brands like McDonald's who promised and continue to promise the same experience from store to store, the same food that you may or may not enjoy anymore. But the whole concept was that we would sell consistency, and in that particular time frame up until 1980s, what we used to sell as marketers was brand image, and it was that sort of brand image really driven by advertising. What happened between the 1980s and the year 2000 or thereabouts is marketing of the present. And my favorite anecdote from this time is HP. The president of HP actually put together a newspaper ad that had all the features and functions of their server. The thinking at that time was that the more we offer to the buyer, the better off we are. So this is what we call the infomercial era. And a lot of times you can see that technology companies specifically are really guilty of marketing the present, where they essentially offer all of their gear, every product, every function and feature to the buyer, and let them make decisions. Little did we know that during this time what we discovered as marketers and cognitive scientists is that people actually start to make arbitrary decisions when they're presented with more than 9 choices. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 9, and this is where you see Apple being successful. Marketing of the future is really different, and it was propelled by, obviously, the availability of the World Wide Web, of social platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, what have you, where things are a lot more accessible and they're available at the click of your fingertips. And how marketing of the future is different is that it's really based on trust. So I'll go into that in a little bit more. So what's happening on sort of from a marketer perspective, and what you're seeing is that we have a completely different landscape of reaching our customers and engaging them in meaningful conversations, discussions, and sales motions. It used to be that we had TV, print, radio, and the internet. What we're facing today is a deep fragmentation of those channels. Even if you're still watching TV, the question is how are you consuming TV? Are you on HBO Go on your computer? Are you watching it on your tablet? How do we reach people today becomes a much bigger conundrum. So hence why there's a new need for folks, marketing and sales folks, and business leader for that matter, to think about what it takes to marketing of the future, where channels are very fragmented and it's really hard to reach customers and create buyer preferences. So let's think about marketing of the future. There are two things that differentiate marketing of the future and the product solutions technologies that we sell in the future as opposed to the present or the past. Products and services are never finished. This is a core concept. If you remember, Google used to put beta when they pushed out a new feature or a new release. They don't do it anymore because we know that products are constantly changing. And we're moving to almost as a service economy, right? This is where you're seeing software as a service and everything being delivered as a service for that matter. So this whole concept means that what folks are doing, what our buyers are looking from us is this consistency that we will deliver not only today and tomorrow, and what this is based off of is really trust. So this is an intangible almost, and it comes with this belief that companies are here for us today and they're here for us tomorrow. The other aspect of marketing of the future is that products and services never stand alone. They are either part of an existing ecosystem or they create their own ecosystems. Think about Force One, and Salesforce and what they've built around their ecosystem and how potent and global this ecosystem is. Think about, Apple, similarly, probably the largest ecosystem out there of developers, consumers, supporting technologies within the Apple community. So as a technology player, whether you're established or you're a startup company, you have to think about, am I part of an ecosystem and how do I market within an ecosystem and how do I create this consistency in my experience and my delivery mechanisms to create trust in the end of the day. So in this new market, the big question is, so how do we engage this new social customer? Who's in charge? The customer can go online. They start usually with search, and we'll talk about some of the methods that today's B2B buyers from the less experienced all the way to the C-level, how they're using the different platforms that are available to them. But how do we engage them? How do we get to this magical point where we have from an MQL, we have an SQL, and this buyer is ready to buy? Well, the trick is to really understand what the lifestyle, the work style, the pains and passions of our buyers are, and there's multiple ways that we can do that. We'll show you some proxy to kind of getting that through data mechanisms. The next one is to really understand their media consumption choices. We can't, make assumptions that anyone in technology is going to read eWeek. That kind of truth, universal truth, doesn't hold anymore. Maybe they're on Spiceworks, maybe they're a part of different forums. So part of this connection with the consumer is once we understand what they're interested in and what drives them, we need to understand their media consumption patterns. The third pillar to connecting with the social customer who's in control is to understand those who influence them. Those may be reporters, those may be analysts, those may be peers. So we look to understand, the full mosaic of influencers, because those are sort of the means to an end of reaching the B2B buyer. And then what we do as marketers is we create content. And content in the bigger sense of the word. It could be anything from teaching folks about a new concept such as the software-defined data center, if you're VMware, or you can teach them about other concepts, all the way down to creating videos, infographics, press releases, and blog posts. So let's just think about, starting at the top, how important is web and social marketing? There's sometimes this lingering doubt from B2B marketers or B2B leaders who are saying, well, web and social are nice to have. Well, that's no longer the case. We have multiple data points that are showing that web is actually driving most of the leads these days, regardless of what B2B technology sector you're in. And, in this path to purchase that's very complex, iterative, and dynamic, people do start their search journey, their educational journey with search engines such as Google. The next question is, do we reach the researchers and the junior level folks, or do we reach C-level folks with web and social? And what we find is that this is consistently coming from a firm which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Serious Decisions, who are tracking how C-level are approaching the buyer's funnel. And what we're seeing is that web and social are actually the largest channel today of how C-level executives are making decisions about the vendors that they want to do business with. Along with, of course, other factors. If you think about the digital tool set of marketers, the Content Marketing Institute and Marketing Profs have been doing this study for a few years now. It's interesting to see the top B2B content marketing tactics that are in use. What you're seeing is social media content being on top of this, and I think B2B marketers are starting to understand that we live in immediate social networks that extend online and offline, and that is the circle of influence that we are trying to be part of, engage with, and hopefully shape as leaders in our particular domains. So it's interesting to see how these tactics have changed over time. Initially, it used to be about white papers or blogs, and now it's more and more social media content other than blogs playing a key role. Again, pointing to the changing landscape. So what's this concept of digital brand authority, and how do we think about this? How do we start applying this concept to our day-to-day lives as head of marketing, head of sales? How do we think about that? Why should we invest in a model like this? Why should we invest in educating the marketplace? Well, if you kind of follow the narrative so far, there are two components to what we need to do as companies. We need to create this trust that we are who we are, and we will continue to deliver what we promise to the market. This is the trust component that comes from consistency of delivery of our product roadmap, of the enhanced features and functions, of how we service our customers. And on the other hand is this concept of expertise. Expertise essentially, again, goes back to this idea that we as players in the market need to be perceived as a source of education as opposed to a source of buying just solutions and products and services. So that forms our reputation. That's your brand authority index, if you will. And if you're at the beginning of this journey where people kind of know you to be an expert in a particular domain, you have a lot of work to do. If you're in the middle of this where folks think that you're good, you have a lot of opportunities to grow. If you're great at a particular domain and you have this reputation already, your challenge or your opportunity at this point would be to keep that leadership so that you continue to shape buyers' preferences as the market changes. So to give you a sense of how we would measure brand authority if it's for a particular executive or company, this is a local company that's amazing. It's called Log Entries. This is their co-founder, Trevor, and working with them for probably a year and a half at this point, we look at how much influence Trevor has in the market and how does he compare to other leaders in the same space. So if we look at a company like Splunk, which is a public company that has a ton of resources, if we look at a company like Sumo Logic, which has more than 100 million in investments today, and we look at Trevor, his reputation in the marketplace is stronger as an executive, and his ability to influence is stronger through the social communities that some of these folks. Then we look at comparison to others within a domain such as DevOps, for example. Where does he stack using tools like this particular one is a code tracker? Where does he stack in the top 50? And you can see that he's now number 13. This is where you know that you're building the reputation and you're building a strong brand and a strong preference for an executive who really gets the pulse of the market and becomes an educational resource for it. So I'm going to walk you through a particular framework that we use at Scratch. We developed this digital authority framework and the diagnosis of it and obviously the whole concept of it to help companies understand how to effectively compete, reduce sales cycles, engage in the marketplace. So when we do these diagnoses, we're looking for gaps and we're looking for opportunities at the same time in 5 different areas. We're looking to learn from what can we glean from what's happening across digital channels. What are people talking about? What are the buzzing themes and topics? What's the distribution of channels? And who owns the conversation today? Then we look at how important is media, and what is the key concepts, or what are the key concepts and topics that the media are covering, and what's our competitor share of voice there, depending on the domain you're in. We look at search because search gives us a number of different things and a number of different insights, and I'll show you a particular example of what this looks like and what you can glean from that. Then we look at social channels specifically. We want to understand, given the growing importance of social channels such as Twitter, LinkedIn, Spiceworks, what's happening within each channel and what can we glean from there that it will help us target our approach to engaging with buyers, winning their preference, and then obviously reducing sales cycles. And then we look at the website analysis of your brand and your competing brands to see how are others marketing online, what can we learn from them, where can we find, again, opportunities to grow as we move forward. So starting with the digital channel analysis, I'm going to give you one particular view into a market. If you're in mobile financial services, and if you're on the technology side, and if you're interested in identifying where conversations happen, and you have a platform in mobile financial services, maybe you have a digital wallet platform that you sell to others like banks who white label it to then offer solutions to their customers, you would want to know where conversations are happening. So this particular view is telling you that within the last 15 months, the conversations are really split between news sites, media sites, blogs, forums, and Twitter. And the conversations that are relevant, where we have called out the noise of anything that's not relevant to the technology space specifically, there are about 6,000. We're not looking for specific and exact numbers in here. We're looking directionally, how big is this category? And then we say, well, what kinds of conversations are happening? What are these folks interested in? Where are they talking about? And what are the major themes and topics? This is one view into analyzing conversations and understanding the larger buckets of topics, and then there are subtopics that are coming off of that. That starts to give us an understanding of what's popular with the buyer, what are the kinds of things that they're looking for, and how can we start creating content that engages buyers. If you're a mobile financial services provider, if you are Tata Consulting, or if you're Conviva or Huawei or Ericsson, depending on where you are, this would give you a different view of what you need to do next. In this particular case, we looked at digital share of voice to see who's leading, how does this map to the overall slice and prioritization of conversations. So depending on who you are, right, if you're Ericsson, you would aim to keep your leadership position. If you're Conviva, you need to do a lot more to catch up with Ericsson in this particular case. So these are the kinds of insights that are starting to tell us what's happening in a domain such as mobile financial services. Then we look at PR visibility in the mobile financial services market, and we're trying to then go and see who's owning the conversation and to what extent. And essentially we look at different themes and topics within mobile financial services to see what we can glean from them depending on what we sell as a company. This view would give us a different way of prioritizing our efforts moving forward, deciding who we benchmark against, understanding how many conversations are happening across the board. Oh, we lost the audio? Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Someone here in the office just waved that they lost the audio. So hopefully everyone could follow me so far. Okay, great. I'll just keep going then. I am not trying to overwhelm you with data points. I guess the point of this is to say that within each channel, if you will, that's available to us, you can use the digital breadcrumbs that are left by people, by your competitors, to really start honing in on where you want to focus next and how you market your company. Okay, so then we look at search. If you are a big data technology provider, especially in the telecom market, what should your marketing strategy be? Where can you focus on, and what can you glean from from the search data that's available. So rather than looking at particularly keywords and their popularity, what we try to do is we're trying to establish how big is our domain, how big is the telecom big data domain, as opposed to big data and technology as an overall bucket. So what we're seeing here is that immediately you see that if big data conversations in telecom are not even 1% of the larger big data bucket of conversations or searches that are happening. So it's an interesting finding because you could decide as a telecom big data provider to stay within the telecom space. What that would essentially end up meaning for you is that you are going to be a very niche player. If you wanted to grow and if you wanted to make sure that your buyers, because we look at them and we say, well, they're not just exposed to telecom big data messages, they're exposed to big data messages, then the big aha question here is, what do we need to own from the big data domain so that we are not limiting our growth as a company? We are reaching out potential undecided buyers, and while we're influencing the folks who are really interested in this conversation today. So the next thing we start to do is we start to look at what are the more popular teams within big data outside of telecom. What can we learn from these trends? Is this a established domain? Meaning, is the market mature? Are buyers and vendors pretty much established what the rules of engagement are in this industry, or is it still a nascent industry? In this particular case, we see a lot of education happening with big data. So if we try to sell particular solutions, there are fewer folks that are ready to buy as opposed to folks who are trying to learn to what end am I looking at big data, where should I be investing. So again, from search you can glean some specific insights about how you market and how you connect with the buyers. Next, we look at a particular analysis of presence of our competitors on specific channels. In this particular case, we pulled out Ericsson. This is their operational support systems and business support system account. This is essentially the software that makes sure that we get the services we need on our mobile phones. Think of it this way. So what can we learn from Ericsson and what they're doing? What we want to do is start analyzing what are they talking about? What kind of content are they sharing? Is it based on a particular content approach? And you know, the size of the words in here gives you a sense of what's more popular in the content that they share on Twitter. So you start to see actually, and this is consistent with the other research in this particular case that we've done, is that, you know, really what Ericsson is trying to promise to the market is this agile operator positioning. And guess what? Not only are they claiming it, they're living it. They're living it through their content and the shares that they're doing. And, you know, you start to see some interesting correlations. They're following a lot less people that follow them. There are a lot of favorites of the content. And we start to see what they think their domain is about. So we can use Ericsson's definition if we're a Convivo or for a Tata Consulting to say, well, what can we glean from this? How can we now focus our content strategy, for example, to be a lot more effective? And we start to look at how many times are they listed in lists, what kinds of lists are they listed in, right? That becomes another data point for us to say, how do we market this company today to create preference in the buyers who are ready to buy and for those who are still undecided but will come back and choose from us because we play the role that they expected us to play, be an educator in the space. In terms of website performance analysis, this is more specific about if we wanted to improve now that we've gleaned our insights about the market, the buyer, their pain points, who influences them, who do we need to benchmark against, what can we learn from our competitors. If you're Xamarin, or you know, you would glean different insights from this than if you are a accelerator, for example. So we start to see order of magnitude, who's attracting the most traffic, what kind of traffic are they attracting, and what can we learn from that. Then we start looking at things like what are the traffic sources that are bringing traffic to particular vendors and particular solutions, and depending on, you know, who you are in the space, you can glean different things. If you're Telerik, you want to maintain your position as leader, so you want to make sure that you understand the strategies of the others. If you're Connie, you have a lot of catch up to do to others, so you have to in a much more targeted way approach the analysis and figure out how to grow your reputation, traffic, and sales funnel. So once we've done this analysis, essentially, we have enough of the insight to determine what our content mix needs to be, from educating the market to helping people make decisions to helping people make selections of our solutions. So at this point, it's much more informed. It's not guesswork. We know how to connect with the market, and we know what channels we need to use. We know the relative importance of forums to technology media, to blogs or influencers, and we know how to stack that so that we get the maximum results, we create immediate preference, and we accelerate the sales funnel. And then we look at what's needed from a paid, owned, and earned perspective to get this to market. And I'm sure that some or most of you are familiar with the difference of the paid, owned, and earned approach, but I'll show you what that means. So essentially, once we've done all this research, what we start asking is, well, let's see where the brand is, right? If you are at the beginning of your journey and people don't know you, you do have to spend money to be noticed. It doesn't mean that you're spending money on brand awareness and banner ads, because that's not the way to build reputation and preference. Hopefully, I've been able to convince you on that. It's more about creating the immediate reach you need for those people who you want to talk to expose your expertise. That's really how you think about the paid component of it. Earned does play an important role, obviously, because that means that we're building reputation with media reporters, analysts, and influencers who are willing to take our message and believe what we have to say. And then from an own perspective, these are your own databases. This is the traffic that comes to your website. These are your customers. Obviously, you don't have a big one if you're starting out and you need to grow this. The whole point would be for you, as you're continuing on your digital authority journey, to flip the scale from being dependent on paid to really continuing to grow your owned and earned channels. This is where you don't have to pay for eyeballs each time you need to say something to the market. So you see how, if you're in the middle, the balance between paid, earned, and owned is much more equal, because now we have gained reputation. People know us. We have started to gain some solid customers for a new offering or for a new company. And then when we're great, essentially what we want to do is make sure that we spend a lot less on paid, but we really invest a lot more in our earned and owned initiatives. Next, what we wanted to share with you is this idea of the role of content and what that means, and how this changes from the typical brand awareness campaign or banner ad campaign, be it on Twitter, LinkedIn, or anywhere else, and how this changes. So if you followed me so far, that reputation is built on us exposing our expertise and playing a role as educators, then content becomes our new digital marketing currency to connect with the markets. And essentially what that means is that we become media houses, right? We play that role of Wall Street Journal for our particular domain, and we have plenty of great examples of that. If you wanted to learn inbound marketing, you would go to HubSpot. That's sort of the role of digital authority, the role that digital authority plays in helping companies get to that point. Some examples, don't just take out my word for it. What other IT leaders are doing as media initiatives. If you look at IBM Big Data and Analytics Hub, the whole reason why this hub exists is to teach people about the opportunities within big data. Obviously, it is branded IBM, but it is an educational resource. If you look at Alcatel, they have the IT strategies, pretty similar approach to how IT is changing, and the fact that Alcatel is here to share all of their knowledge and best practices by working with global customers. Cognizant, another example of more of a system integrator in the space that have changed perceptions about what a partner or a channel partner plays these days, is talking about signals from the future of work. You're looking at Cognizant now trying to own the future of how we will do business, how we will collaborate with each other, and this is essentially equivalent to The Economist in this case, in this particular domain. Another example of IBM going after the mid-size IT market, educating IT within midsize about all the different ways they need to think about technology. In terms of channels, once you know, these are the kinds of things that we look at and the kinds of aspects that we pull out depending on the analysis that we've done. The next one is determining the investment, and we always recommend that folks think about owned first and foremost, because this is ultimately the destination where you want to send people. You do want to own the folks that you want to talk to, whether they're ready to buy or not. So these are the ways to think about owned channels such as website, blog, newsletter, databases, all the way down to social owned, where you're starting to think about LinkedIn and using LinkedIn self-publishing platform, for example, Twitter, YouTube, SlideShare, all of the channels where you can control the experience and the sharing of the content and the educational process for that matter. These are the components that usually get played out. Sometimes analysts play a role, sometimes they don't. Influencers for sure. PR, we know that we're looking always at top publications and reporters. And search engine optimization, your ability to earn traffic to your website, qualified traffic is how we think about search engine optimization, and then paid as a model. So I guess at this point, this concludes the official portion of telling you about digital authority, why it's important, and how we get there. I guess the reason why we have myself and Lindsay on the line is that we literally align on this continuum of digital brand authority and the sales realm. Excuse me, folks, I'm a little sick. So, Lindsay, over to you to do some closing remarks and let folks ask questions.
Okay, awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Laura. That was great. So it does look like we had a couple questions come in throughout the presentation, so I will go ahead and ask those now. So the first one is, my digital and marketing engines are strong, but we're struggling with MQL conversion rates. So I'll actually address this one, and Laura, absolutely feel free to jump in. And I see this quite a bit, right? So a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, they will have a good online presence, good brand awareness, and drive a lot of MQLs into the top of the funnel. But it's that age-old story of converting those MQLs over to sales qualified leads, and the best way to do that. So here at Demand Drive, we definitely focus on separating the two functions between, inbound follow-up and qualification of those MQLs, and then separating out outbound proactive prospecting. So for this particular question, I'll focus on the inbound, since that's what we're referring to here. In order to increase conversion rates on the MQLs, I think first off, it's really important that you have sort of that engine, that sales development function that lives between sales and marketing, right? So a lot of times what I'll see is that, there's all of these great MQLs, and they're handed right over to an account executive who's looking to close business, and they're simply not doing the right nurture and follow-up activity. Or the MQLs, they'll continue to be nurtured through the marketing automation system, but there's no human touch. So I definitely, first off, would suggest there be some sort of either outsourced or internal team that's responsible for qualifying all of those MQLs that you're investing your money to create, and then having a call methodology and call process, and as far as how many touches you're putting into each of those MQLs. And industry averages state that it really does take about 8 to 12 touches before really dispositioning a lead as either qualified or disqualified. I would also encourage that there be some additional account mapping done. So you get all these MQLs. Let's say, for example, you do a white paper campaign, and you have a bunch of folks download a white paper off of your site, and you have your sales development team call through those folks. I definitely would suggest taking more of an account-based approach, where you then pull in alternate contacts at that company that may not have come through the inbound channel, just to make sure you stay multi-threaded within those accounts. And then, kind of lastly, make sure that your team is gathering as much market intelligence and sales data as possible before passing those leads on. So that will increase your conversion rates and making sure that everything has sort of that human touch and can get qualified as quickly as possible. So I hope that answered that question. Yeah. Anything to add there, Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say this was fantastic to think about. How do you optimize your conversion process? One thing is when the original question was stated, I was wondering. So the question was stated as my digital marketing sales initiatives are strong, but we're not closing. Just make sure that you understand what problem you're solving for to begin with, because if you're not selling, it may be what Lindsay described, that you haven't optimized the downstream process and you haven't tried all of the different ways to engage your prospects. You may, however, have an issue of not having qualified leads to begin with. So that's more of a market fit and understanding, are you doing the right things to bring the right folks in the door first? And then from there, definitely follow the roadmap that Lindsay just shared with you.
Perfect. Thank you. There's actually sort of a sub-point to that question. It sounds like there's a question on how many leads can a rep follow up on in a given month. So that really depends on your call process and how many touch points you're putting into each prospect. A good rule of thumb is that one sales development rep can really disposition fully about 250 accounts per month. That doesn't mean that there's certainly not more than one contact within those accounts, but I'm just talking about that they've gathered about 80% of all the information needed as far as qualification data, intelligence data, and disposition. So if they're doing anywhere from 60 to 100 activities per day, 250 accounts is about the right number. And then Laura, I think this last question, and feel free if there's some more that folks want to submit, go ahead. But this is the last one that we have here, and it's we are currently developing our digital influence. How do I determine investment? So Laura, I think this one is more directed to you.
Sure. I don't think that I have a magic answer to this question, because we in order to tell you what investment is needed, I guess what I would need to understand and the team here would need to understand usually is to what end, where are you in this journey? So you're pretty much describing kind of our process as well. Now you've determined what you need to do next. I guess we need to understand a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve, what you have found so far, and help you determine what the investment needs to be. Hopefully it's not a campaign-based investment and you're thinking of this as an ongoing program that you build on and continue to grow. But other than that, it's hard to say how much you need to invest without knowing more.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Laura. So that was the last question that we had. So at this point, we can go ahead and wrap up. Thanks so much for everybody who joined today. We will be following up with the recorded version as well as the slides, and we are going to be reaching out to the winner of the Digital Authority Assessment that Laura had mentioned earlier in the webinar. So we'll follow up with that individual directly and not announce their name here over the webinar. But thanks again for joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thank you.